Good morning. Hello and welcome to another edition of Veterans Corner. I'm Marshall Preston, U.S. Air Force Lieutenant Colonel retired, your host for today's segment. Veterans Corner is an initiative of your Westborough Veterans Advisory Board and graciously produced by our partners here at Westborough Television. The goal of Veterans Corner is to share pertinent information on topical issues that may affect our veterans, families, residents, and friends within the community. It is also an opportunity to spotlight local veterans. We seek to share some of their experiences and stories to highlight their service and continued civic contributions to the community at large. And by doing so, we hope to educate the community of the variety and breadth of experiences that veterans have, and perhaps break down some of the assumptions, biases, or stereotypes that we may hold on to, consciously or unconsciously. And to that end, we are quite fortunate to have our 2023 Westborough Veteran of the Year, Paul Freeman Jr. with us today. And I'm looking forward to the conversation ahead. Paul, welcome. Thank you for being here. Congratulations again for a well-deserved honor.
Thank you very kindly.
Yeah. You've got a long history in the town, a long history associated with veterans, but let's start sort of back in the beginning. Give me some biographical information.
Okay. I was born and raised in Worcester until I was 15, and then my folks came out here to Westborough. I was going to parochial schools back at that time frame, and my father said he would try to get me down to Milford, but I had family and friends here in town, so when I started here in Westborough, it worked out well because I knew a lot of people.
Okay.
Then I ended up graduating, and then after graduating, I went to Worcester Junior College to be a structural engineer, and I didn't care for it because all my friends were going to Vietnam. So one day I decided to go down to the center of Worcester to the old post office business, and I said, I do know the United States Navy.
What year? What time frame?
1969.
Okay.
And make a long story short, when I got after boot camp, they sent me down to Paxford, Maryland. I ended up staying down there for almost a year and a half. And I had my first sea daddy got me hooked up as a quartermaster to go to quartermaster A school. So here I am going up to Newport, Rhode Island to go to A school, and I didn't care for it.
Okay.
And I was able to go to work for the command master chief of the base, and he asked me how am I from this area, and I said yes. He says, I'm going to make you the duty driver. I says fine. So I used to go around to all the airports, pick up dignitaries, captains, and all that good stuff. Meantime, the USS Bowen pre-com was right down the hallway, so I got to know all the people down there. To make a long story short, I got picked up as a crew member for the US Bowen as a plank owner. If you people that don't know what a plank owner is, that's the original crew to commission the ship.
That's fantastic.
And then, of course, I from 93 to 73, I spent 4 years. I had a chance to continue my career, but I said, well, let's come out, stay in the reserves. And to 1970, was it 75? And that's when I got my final discharge.
From active duty to the reserves.
To reserves. And then I did a lot of different things. I was construction, iron worker, drove trailer truck, worked for Atlas van lines and delivered furniture all over the country. And finally one day I'm bartending down Paulie's in Shrewsbury, Mass. And a good friend of mine comes in as a recruiter, and he says, I can get you back in. I said, been out almost 7 years. He said, I can get you back in. Make a long story short, I went back in. The only thing is I lost 2 stripes. I had to start all over again, but within 7 years, I made Chief Petty Officer.
That's pretty...
And 2 years later, I made Chief Warrant Officer. And been on 8 different ships. 2 of the ships as a plank owner was the USS Bowen, the E-1079, and also the battleship Iowa, BB-61.
Okay.
And when I made Chief Warrant Officer, I was the ship's posted on AOR-7, which is the USS Roanoke.
Okay.
And then I went from prior to the Roanoke, I was with my countermeasure Squadron 19 out of Alameda, California. And while there, I did a couple of tours on board the USS Tripoli.
Okay.
And the Denver, the Trenton, and there was a few others that I can't remember, but we did a lot of different deployments.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to slow you down and back you up. It's likely made a ton of sense to fellow veterans, but I'm going to try and reach an audience, that's a bit more expansive.
I'm sorry.
So, no, you're doing great. So tell us about the USS Bowen and sort of describe that ship and its mission.
The Bowen was what they call a fast frigate.
Okay.
Right out of the fleet. It could go very quick, very fast. Had ASROC missiles that would go after submarines. It was actually anti-submarine ship.
Okay.
Had a 5-inch 54. Could shoot almost quite a few rounds per minute. Also had torpedo tubes on the port and starboard side. At that time, in the early 70s, was a state-of-the-art ship, and it was a Knox class destroyer, which they made quite a few of until they finally, after 30 years, they started selling them off. And
were you out at sea? How often with it?
Oh, that ship, because it was brand new, were haze gray underway all the time.
Okay.
And matter of fact, out of the 2+ years I was with, I was like we were in port a month.
Oh, wow.
We used to do back-to-back bed cruises, and that was always 5 months. I remember one time we came back, and not even a month later, we were right back at it again. My duties on board the Bowen was I was part of the deck department, and I stood bridge watches. Eventually became the boatswain of the watch. I was in charge of all the port and starboard lookouts, the aft lookout, after steering. I had to carry a sidearm, and I would go around the ship to make sure everything was going copacetic. And in case there was an emergency up on the bridge, if I needed to take the helm, because I was a master helmsman, I would take the helmsman, put my hands on the start steering the ship, to have other people do other things as needed.
Pretty cool.
And we also did mooring and anchoring, Medmoors. Medmoors is a big, especially over the Mediterranean. We would back the ship up and drop 2 anchors. They'd be crossed like this. And then we would have a couple of stern lines against the pier. It was quite different.
So clearly crossed the Atlantic, stationed out of Newport?
Yes.
Originally? Okay. And then crossed the Atlantic a couple times into the Mediterranean.
Yes.
Ever into the Red Sea and around.
I've been through the Suez Canal many times.
Okay.
I've been through the Panama Canal many times. I did time on the West Coast and time on the East Coast.
Okay.
Yeah, I've been very fortunate to have been around the world. I said it a couple of times.
How many times have you crossed the equator?
Ooh, never did that.
Okay.
Never did. Came close on board the Iowa. We were going to cross it, but something came up and we had to go someplace else. Okay. So I never did get my shell back.
Any favorite seas or waters or crossings?
No, every place I've been to, and I've been in a lot of different seas. Back in '82, when we evacuated all the PLOs, and Commodore Border, who eventually became the Chief of Naval Operations, he was he used my ship, the USS Manly, as his flagship, and I eventually became his coxswain to bring him to different ships, so he would talk to the commanding officers, and then bring him back. And when the Iraq-Iran war started, we went into the Indian Ocean, and I would take him to where he needed to go. And that, to me, the Indian Ocean was probably the harshest of all of them. Okay. Because of the heat. You know, you're dealing with 130 degrees in the sun, 125 in the shade. And unfortunately, on 3 occasions, I had to go over there. And when I was on board the Roanoke, when the Persian War started, we used to do all our unreps at 7 o'clock at night. And it was still 120 degrees at that time.
Well, talk to us a little bit about conditions on a ship and you know how 120 degrees outside equates into living conditions.
Well, we had the air conditioner on board the ship, but the idea is that we try to do all our evolutions at nighttime because of the heat. Yep. We would be pulling in every 3 days. Every 3 days we pull in the Javali to bring on stores and equipment that we needed to disperse to the other ships. The day we would pull out, we would tie up to come alongside a USNS tanker, and they would give us almost 7 million gallons of fuel. And that was a good 8 hours. Once we got that fuel, we're right back with the fleet again and started giving fuel and stores. We also had 2 CH-46 helicopters that would pick up, deliver, back and forth, back and forth. We had 4, when I was on board the Iowa, we had 4 deck departments and roughly 355 people. During the Persian Gulf, when we were over there, no incidents, thousands upon thousands of goods that we did. And I'm talking, when I mean by thousands, I'm talking about the 50 to 100,000. And I don't know how many tons that is off the top of my head, but yep. I do have a thing that I did do for my fit reps. I said, wow, we did a lot.
Yeah, it adds up pretty quick.
Yeah,
and
it does.
It's pretty impressive on the logistics capabilities that the Department of Defense offers and can offer combatant commands and why we are sort of globally focused. So, okay. So talk to me on the USS Manly. Tell me again the Admiral's name.
Mike Border, Admiral, Commodore. At that, he was a captain, but they made him a Commodore.
Okay. And
he was Mike Border. Eventually, he made Admiral, and he was Chief of Naval Operations. And
did his leadership style make an impression on you?
He was, yes, he did. He was a very nice guy. He was a enlisted man that came up through the ranks just like I did,
yep.
known as Mustangs.
Yep.
And he was really a nice guy, really a nice guy.
And following that on a leadership style, what type of leadership ethics did you learn along the way, and how did you apply that to future roles?
I learned from my bosses.
Yep.
I watched their style, and I would take what they did, bring it into my system, and sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't.
Right.
It was always a learning curve, but eventually as I came up through the ladder, I started getting better as a leader. And I always made sure that I chastised in private and I praised in public.
Yep.
And I used to do a lot of praising in public for the reason being that sometimes I had to use other divisions to do things, and because I used to live on board ship, so if they knew they had a problem, they would come up to the boatswain locker to my office and say, hey, we need your boats.
Right.
So, okay, no problem.
Okay. Any young sailors that you sort of took a liking to and snuck under your wing and potentially saved them from some bad decisions?
Yes, a lot of the guys I took under my wings were now retired captains, commanders, master chiefs, senior chiefs. So it was very nice to see that some of my influence came up the ladder.
You had a couple friends that are Veteran of the Year honor, drive out, one from New York, and it's always nice to have that type of...
Yeah, Tom DePalmer and his wife Lori are very good friends of mine. Tom retired as a chief warrant officer in food instructor. I know I'm going to food specialist. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's right.
And we stayed in contact for almost 40 years.
It's impressive.
And we're getting ready to go out in May of this year to Fleet Week when the U.S. Iowa hosts Fleet Week in May. So it should be interesting.
That'll be fantastic.
Going back out there again. We're going to try to take a hop out of McGuire Air Force Base. Should be interesting.
Yeah, it'll be good.
Yeah.
Well, I hope it works out and share some pictures when it does.
I will. I will.
Well, again, going back to sort of some of the early ones, tell me about your family and sort of their reaction to you walking in and raising your hand.
I was very humble and very proud to see how many family and friends showed up at the town hall on the 28th of November. Very touched, very touched. And the nice thing about it that my family members knew that I was one of 5 that made the career in the service. Started with my great uncle John, Navy, my cousin Steve, Navy, my cousin John, Marine Corps, myself, Navy, and my cousin Jim, who was a 20-year scientist for the Department of Defense, and eventually got his doctorate as a PhD in clinical psychologist.
Now, and he had helped sort of create some of the meals ready to eat?
No, that was Ron Lampe.
Okay.
That was Ron Lampe. But get back to my cousin Jim. They would use him if there was ever a major casualty in any of the armed branches of the service. He's one of the guys that went there.
Okay.
And he would do his investigation, give his reports to the Department of Defense, and he did it for quite a few years. Yeah. I also want to mention that he did 42 years of my family tree, and went all the way back to the 8th century.
That's
and
impressive.
I took all his information after he passed away at a young age, and I took all that and started our own website, and all the information is on our website.
It's pretty cool. Now you help us. That's tickled my fantasy down sort of our flags and honoring the veterans in town. Given you grew up in Worcester, I imagine most of your family is out that direction, and you may not have any family.
I don't have any family left in Worcester. I have family in Shrewsbury, Boylston, up in New Hampshire, Auburn, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Maryland, Florida. A lot of them families down in Florida. I have family in Texas, and I have family in Oregon, California, and Washington State.
And coming from sort of a military family, they were supportive of you and raising your hand and enlisting at the time. Any pushback given that Vietnam was there?
my parents wanted me to go to college. Yeah. No, do something, but they didn't realize that my call was to service.
Okay.
And matter of fact, when I was out, I missed it. When I was talking to people, I said, "Well, I would like to get back in." Well, why don't you? But eventually, I did. Eventually, I did. It was the best thing that ever happened to me.
Super. So from there, so you're back in. This is in the '80s, and you finally retired from the Navy early '90s.
I retired in '96, June 1st of 1996. And there was an article in the Community Advocate looking for people to join the Veterans Advisory Board.
Wow.
And so I put my application in, and I saw Frank Desiata, and he explained to me what was going on. Unknown to me that one of my bosses, Admiral Ray Sariham, was also in town. He was the CEO of logistics for BJ's.
Okay.
And so at our first meeting in September, I walk in and I'm looking, and I says, my boss is here. And that was the same time that Ron Lampe, who retired from Natick Lab, he was there. Al Blunt, George Merchant, Charlie Naples, Jim Greenlaw, Frank Desiata, who was a veteran agent, and Jerry Rivide. So we all kind of banded together. Oh, I almost forgot about Pete Howard.
Okay.
And God bless his soul. We all got together and we accomplished an awful lot.
Yeah.
And we especially get the monument down there at Pine Grove. We got grave sites for veterans and their spouses and vice versa. We did the same thing up at the new cemetery. Once that opens up, I was involved with the Persian Gulf Monument. I was on the Persian Gulf Committee with 4 people. Unfortunately, 2 of them have passed away. But it was nice to be part of the town and do things.
No, your fingerprints are all over the town in subtle ways and very humble ways, but significant ones. And my thanks to you and all of the men that you've mentioned. There's a proud tradition and a proud line of service, both from the uniform and then continued into the civic realm. So well done and thanks.
Yeah, I have no intention, even though I retired from the Veterans Advisory Board. No matter what they do, if they need a hand, I'm there. I'm a senior vice commander for the American Legion, and I'm always trying to improve that, and we're doing very well. We're starting to get people to come on board. And
well, I'd love to offer you a floor to speak a little bit about the American Legion and sort of where it is, how it's doing, and
when we got when I have to give a data boy to Paul Horrigan in John Gallant. They got everybody together, and since actually the last 3 years, we went from a very small group of people where now we're up to 18 people every month. We have other people that can't make it because they're still working, but they still have interactions, especially when we do the poppies.
Yep.
And other things. I mean, we have blood drives, but we haven't had that for a while since the epidemic. But we also had the veteran luncheons up there at the senior center. We hold our meetings up at the senior center because we don't have our own place. And but we also take care of anybody that's passes away. We make sure we bring them flowers. At Christmas time, we bring fruit baskets or gift certificates, which we have done in the past. We also give to the scholarship fund.
Yep.
For the high school.
Yeah, and there's still American Legion baseball. You all sponsor some of the local Little League teams.
Yes, we do that too. Thank you for reminding me.
Yep. And then there's generally a sort of an essay writing contest tied to the scholarship fund. There's Boys Nation. The auxiliary does a Girls Nation, sort of again focused on youth and civic mindedness. I also know that there's the Veterans of Foreign War post in town that sadly is still struggling through trying to renovate their post building. So those two communities are complementary of each other and supportive. Yeah. Okay. Well, I'd love to hear, you have a long history and tie to this town, and you arrived in Westborough back in high school age.
1965.
So thoughts on how the town has changed, grown, evolved over that time?
When I came to town, we were lucky we had 2,500 people. At 6 o'clock at night, they rolled up the sidewalks and turned the lights on. With very few. I don't know how many times I went from catechism classes at St. Luke's and have to walk 4.5 miles to get back home. I don't know how many times I walked off the road and fell into a gully because there was very few lights. And if a car came by, he would stop and pick you up. But that was a nice thing. Of course, eventually when I got my license, that was a different story. Yep. And I didn't have to walk or hitchhike anymore. The town has grown immensely. The only problem is our roads never caught up to the growth of the town. Someday it will.
And I feel like the whole region is done that as well and sort of bursted and grown into each other. But it still has from a relatively new arrival, a good identity, a good center town, and a great welcoming feel to it.
Well, the nice thing about Westborough, it has 495, has Route 9, has the Mass Pike. Of course, they're doing a lot of work on the Mass Pike and 495 to alleviate all the congestion.
Yep.
Hopefully, this plan works.
Hopefully.
And of course, we won't have all these empty buildings that we have here in town. People will be able to fill up these empty buildings and bring more resources into the town.
Yep.
More jobs.
Yeah. All right. Well, let me bring us back to uniform service, and if I may, let me talk to us a little bit about your service in the Gulf War and where you were and how that came about.
Well, the Gulf War, I was on board I was the ship's spokesman on the road on KOR-7. My job was to give fuel, stores, repair parts to all the battle group that I was in. I was actually in the Abraham Lincoln Carrier Task Force.
Okay.
And like I said before, every 4 days we would meet up with them, give them everything that we needed to give them fuel, store parts and everything else, food, frozen goods and all that stuff, and then right back to Joe Valley to load back up again. So it was a lot of 19-hour days, let's put it that way.
Okay.
A lot of 19-hour days.
Was that a 6-month deployment at sea?
No, this was actually, we were only there for I'm going to say roughly right around 4, maybe 5, trying to remember. About 5 months, I believe it was.
Okay. And then at that time, home station was Norfolk, or was it San Diego?
No, I was stationed in Long Beach, California.
Okay.
And eventually we went from Long Beach, when Long Beach closed, we went up to Bremerton. We were supposed to go, there was a new base that they were thinking about putting us there, but eventually they put us in Bremerton, which was probably in a lot of ways a lot better.
Okay. Thinking through some of those journeys, any favorite ports of leave?
One of the, actually there was three different places on the East Coast. Portsmouth, England, Rota, Spain, and and also Barcelona.
Yep.
Outstanding places. It was great liberty. People were very nice, and I used to take a lot of tours because I would like to see the area and also meet the people.
Yep.
And that's what I used to do.
I had the good fortune of commanding the base just north of Rota, Morón Air Base, and got to know Rota fairly well, and great spot and wonderful people, the Spanish. So.
Now, of course, on the West Coast, I was very fortunate to go up to the Aleutian Islands and do operations off the Aleutian Islands.
I imagine those have some choppy seas.
Oh, matter of blink of an eye, it changes like New England. We were doing ops one day, and I was up there at Dutch Harbor, off the Dutch Harbor. And, of course, I had my fishing pole out, trying to see if I could catch anything. And I noticed that the wind started picking up, and, of course, our helicopters were doing their things. And eventually I had to call the commanding officer up. I say, hey, listen, weather is changing. I says, I like to get at least, we had 3 boats out there. I said, I'd like to get 2 of the boats out back on the ship. I said, I'll stay until the helicopters finish their maneuvers. And I says, and then we get on. By the time the helicopters get done, we brought back the sled, got it on board the ship, and then eventually got me up there. We went from calm seas up to 6-7 footers. And then eventually we turned into a very, very large storm.
I imagine that.
And the storm turned into a typhoon.
Ooh. Okay.
And the ship being flat bottom, a lot of people were seasick.
Roland, were you?
No,
you have a good,
I actually, knock on wood, I never get seasick. But eventually I did go up and help the bridge out.
Okay.
So.
See some good wildlife up in the Aleutians?
Yes. Matter of fact, the day we were doing ops there, I was able to catch a 70-pound halibut. Wow. So we ate good in the chief's mess.
Well done. Congrats.
I was lucky. Yeah, there's a lot of wildlife up there. I've seen bears. Especially when I went I did a tour up the Connaught River, the Indian Nation. I saw all kinds of wildlife. My pole sat there in a boat, and I'm taking pictures. My cousin said, what are you doing? I says, I'm taking pictures.
Awesome scrapbook and beautiful part of the world.
It was actually, a lot of people don't realize that's the last of the, should I say, one of the last of the forests that we have in this country, and called, the Olympic Peninsula. And absolutely beautiful.
Oh, good.
The only problem is it rains too much.
Well, it keeps what is it? It's not a tropical rainforest, but it's a temperate rainforest.
Yeah, something like that. Something like that. I don't know the terms. That's like Cedar Swamp being one part of the old glaciers for many, many, many years ago.
The start of the Assabet. Yep.
So.
Okay. Well, as you reflect back on your time of service, are there any lessons learned that you'd like to share and impart to to the next generation? I
would like to see the draft come back, and I'm going to tell you why. When I was part of the draft period, of course I didn't get drafted. I volunteered. But the draft brought in people for 2 years. And I'm talking about everybody is different, but we brought in a lot of people that had nice ideas. They were educated and everything else. I'm not saying that the people in the service are not educated, but we had a vast array of people coming in. Did 2 years. Some of them liked it, made a career out of it. The voluntary service that we got going on, it's a lot of pressure on these guys because they're trying to do what they can with limited supplies and everything else. I saw it firsthand back in June of 2023 when I went down to San Diego. I saw so many ships in port. I said, wow, I never seen that before. Usually all the ships are out, not very few in port. But I think if that happens, we'll have a better armed service.
I've heard folks discuss sort of a national service before, and expanded beyond not just uniformed, but to some version of public service, whether it be Teach for America, farming, some type of national service. I enjoy the conversations. Of course, the challenge and the devil's in the details of how you set it up and execute it. And it comes with significant costs and burdens to administratively. But having served, and having a sense of contributing to the community, I certainly tend to agree with you. I know that there's lots of folks that serve in different capacities to their fellow man, and seek to make society better, even if it's through a capitalist, developing a corporation and providing a service to those of us. So, okay. Any stories that we haven't scratched that you'd like to?
No, I could talk to you all day on sea stories. I have 1,000 of them.
Okay.
But no, I've had the old saying, you have good days and you got bad days. The military that I was in, then I had a lot of good days, very few bad days. So I was very fortunate. Met a lot of nice people. I still in contact with a lot of people on different ships that I served, and it makes it nice.
Is there one moment in time that you really look back fondly, and or a deployment or a group of team that you hold a special place in your heart?
My greatest ship I was ever on was bringing back the battleship Iowa. We had to go down to a place down next to Mobile, Alabama. It was called Pascagoula, Mississippi. And I'm going to tell you a thing. You think that the Indian Ocean's hot? Of course, down there, it's 90 degrees and the humidity is 90 degrees.
Yep.
And I was going through probably 4 to 6 pairs of coveralls every day. And when I got down there, I was one of 25 people. And my job was to take 350 kids out of boot camp and put them to work. So I spent 1 week of interviewing those 350 people and put them in different categories. And one of the categories that I did, it was start up a spray team, a paper and ink team. So in other words, we would go in to all the staterooms in the battleship Iowa. I would have a team go in there. They did all the papering. Once I went in there and inspected, or I had one of my other people go in there and inspect it, they say, okay, it's ready to go. The spray team would go in there, they would spray it. But we would have 4 or 5 staterooms lined up, so the spray would go from one room to the next room to the next room to the next room. Day later, we would go, I have a team go in and start depapering all those 5 rooms. Then I would have a person, another team that would go in there, they would do all the touch-ups. We would go back in and inspect everything. If everything was all fine, we'd close the door, put a piece of tape across it saying, done. We ended up doing 80 staterooms, and we started doing compartments. We started doing offices. Matter of fact, we're actually beating out the shipyard spray team.
Congrats.
But it was I'm going to tell you a funny story. There was a woman in her 80s that donated a baby grand piano to the ship's bosun. And so he calls me up. He says, I want you to take a couple of guys, get a deuce and a half and go get this baby piano. I said, well, 3 guys ain't going to do it. So I ended up taking 5 guys, plus myself. Nice story from the lady. She told me all about it, and I made sure I wrote everything down. Brought the thing down. I had the crane bring it up and set it up on the forecastle, which is the forward part of the ship. And I got the yacht people making a big entrance into the side of the wardroom. Here comes the commanding officer. He says, what are you doing? Oh, you didn't get the memo from the ship's bosun? He says, no. He says, I got a baby grand piano I'm going to put in the wardroom. So you turn around and off he goes. The yard people said, what are you doing? I said, hurry up and get this thing open so I can get this thing in and start closing it up. Yep. Oh, it was funny. It was funny.
Because he was going to turn that off.
Yeah.
Stop it.
Unfortunately, that piano disappeared. It's no longer in the wardroom. Oh. So whoever went to, I hope they enjoy it.
Yeah. Well, good. Well, thank you for all of the stories, and like you, I could keep going and listening and hearing them.
Yeah, I could too.
But I think we've mostly hit our time, and I'll give you one last shot of anything else on your mind that you wanted to share with the crew.
No, I just hope that the veterans in town that are not part of the American Legion or VFW or the Veterans Advisory Board think about doing it.
Yeah, I would echo that.
Yeah.
So, okay. Thanks,
Thank
Paul.
You. Thank you.
And let me say goodbye to the community. So as we wrap up today's session, I'd like to remind our audience that our Veteran Service Officer, Jeff Farrell, maintains an office on the first floor of Town Hall, and whose contact information can be seen on the screen at the end of today's show. Both he and the Veterans Advisory Board are here to help guide you to the resources and benefits that your uniformed service may have earned. Finally, I'd like to thank Westborough Television for their continued support in putting this Veterans Corner together. And of course, a big thank you to today's guest, Paul Freeman Jr., for coming on today. And until next time, thank you for joining us. I hope you have a wonderful week.